Nice to see a couple of new faces here. Welcome. We are at part 3 of the series, but it shouldn't really be difficult to catch up. You can, of course, always look at the videos of the first 2 parts if necessary. So, we have been speaking the last couple of times about this technique of psychotherapy called internal family systems. IFS was credited to Dr. Richard Schwartz, who comes from a background of psychotherapy, and he's integrated this aspect of social constructivism into psychology and developed a lovely
all of us have various parts which ultimately forms what we call our personality. So there are these little parts of us that form it, and therefore the term internal family, that there is an internal family that exists which co-creates the personality. The center of that personality is what is termed as the self. Dr. Schwartz talks of self as the seat of consciousness. It's that part of us which knows why we exist, the purpose of our life, and it knows where to draw energy from around the universe. But the self may sometimes get clouded by other parts which sometimes make more noise, so to say. So there are these parts, are all different kinds of parts that tend to carry burdens. These burdens could be that of memories of hurt and harm and injury and all of those things that we go through life, and because of those burdens their beliefs tend to get a little warped, and therefore they sometimes become dysfunctional in nature, and in the process they overshadow the self, and therefore there are times in life that we feel lost, or we feel we don't know what to do ahead. So the second part, we spoke about one such category of part, which is the protector, so typically in the internal family the fight is between the protector and the exiled part. Right? So there is the self and the protector and the exiled, that's the primary drama triangle. And the exiled parts are those parts of us which we are trying to suppress, or we are trying to hide because they are very unpleasant to deal with. So an exiled part could be a memory of rape, it could be a memory of loss of somebody close to us, something that brings up a lot of pain and hurt, and therefore we don't want to touch that memory and those emotions, and therefore we exile those parts of us. And the protector parts are built so as to keep that exiled part suppressed. And anytime, for whatever reason, because of things around you or because of some incident, if the protector feels that somewhere you're moving towards the exiled part is about to surface, then there is one particular category of protector called the firefighter, which starts coming up and starts doing everything to make sure you don't touch the exiled part. Typically the firefighters that we encounter are those parts that make us probably go drink heavily or get into substance abuse or get into a depressive state, so that you're diverted and therefore you don't touch that exiled part.
I got a question. This protector part, as you said, they are into action when you are in the awake state, in the conscious state. What when you are in your sleep or something like that?
Protectors are there all the time. So
even
these are all these parts exist in our conscious self as well as in the unconscious.
That some people get dreams of their past or bad experiences or something there. So maybe at that time the protectors are not...
the protector is still present, but in the sleep state the unconscious has a little more leeway to express itself, because the conscious mind is at rest. So the protector parts are usually very active in the conscious mind. So the moment you wake up, you put on that manager face and say, okay, I've got to get on in the day, I have to do these things, meet these people, get these things done. So the protector is very active, and in the night the protector says, okay, there's nothing to do now, so let me rest, and in the process the exile tends to wake up.
Especially when there's some trigger during the day, then
yeah.
on those days like it can.
So the exiled parts largely reside in the unconscious, right? Not by design, it's we push them into the unconscious. So that's what we spoke about the last time in terms of how do we work with the protectors and start having a dialogue. So today we're going to be looking at one very dominant protector, which is the inner critic that all of us experience at various points in time in our life. Now the assumption when we work with the internal family systems model is that no matter how dysfunctional a part looks like, the part always has a good intention.
Yeah.
So a part of us that could make us drink too much, or it's making us feel depressed or suicidal, has a good intention for us. Ultimately the part is always trying to protect us and heal us and keep us safe. In the process it might act in a totally irrational and dysfunctional manner, that the outcome is different, but intention of all parts are always good is the basis that we work with, and therefore that holds for the inner critic as well. A lot of us don't have a very good relationship with the inner critic for obvious reasons, but at the same time it's important to understand as we work with it that it has a good intention. Somewhere that intention has gotten masked with various other things that happen along the way. So
sometimes it is termed as inner child also.
The inner child may not necessarily be critic. Yeah. So the inner critic is often experienced by the criticized child. So the child becomes a recipient of the inner critic.
Parents. Parents.
Inner parents, yeah. So in transactional analysis terms, what is called the critical parent is often the inner critic. So the inner critic is that part of us which tells us, you know, you're not good enough, you can't do this, remember the last time you failed. Right? It's that part of us which is constantly judging us, putting us down. And in the process, of course, undermining our subconscious, our self-confidence in a big way. It's always trying to put down our self-image and self-esteem.
All the negative thoughts.
Yeah, it will bring up everything that is negative, and normally we hear it as self-doubt, you know, a thought coming up in mind when you're about to do something, saying, what if it goes wrong? What if you can't do it? What if you make a fool of yourself? What if somebody laughs at you? All that is the inner critic talking. So some of these inner critics are born because of our own experiences. So you know, maybe we were a kid, we tried doing something and we failed. Let's say, as a small child, you participated in an elocution competition, you went on stage and you forgot. And therefore the experience was that I went on stage and I fooled myself, made a fool of myself. The inner critic starts developing to say, you know, you're not good enough to go on stage or make a presentation or talk to people because you'll always make a fool of yourself. So while the belief of having made a fool of myself was true in that one little instance, what the inner critic does is it holds on to it and says, even if the situation changes, even if the time and space changes, I will still hold on to that belief so that I protect you. Because ultimately it's trying to protect that self from experiencing that bad emotion, that hurt and that embarrassment that little child may have gone through. So it has a protective role, however it gets very dysfunctional if you allow it to exist beyond a reasonable time. So if we were to look at what sustains the inner critic, and the fact that the inner critic lives within us means there is somebody who's allowing it to live. Right? So every time the inner critic comes up, there is some other part inside of us that's listening to it and saying, yeah, okay, maybe you're right. And therefore the inner critic survives. If there were nobody to listen to that inner critic, nobody to acknowledge its existence, then the part wouldn't survive. Right? So there are anchors inside of us which are allowing this part to live and sometimes even flourish. So typically these parts are either our belief systems, the parts that hold our beliefs. So beliefs about saying I'm not good enough, or I'll never make enough money, or I don't look good, I'm not good with communication. All those limiting beliefs that we hold. Those are what anchor the inner critic. They allow it to sustain and flourish. And of course, memories. So, memories in the sense the emotional remembrance of memories, not just the incidents themselves, but the fact that we allow our emotions to run with the memory. So, those are the anchors of inner critic, and therefore when we do inner critic work in IFS, the idea is to also engage with beliefs and memories, let it surface, let it come up, and then release it as and when needed. So there are several types of inner critic, and while it's not necessarily essential to label which inner critic are you dealing with, the types can give us a clue in terms of what are we handling at that point in time, and therefore where is it coming from. It makes the process a little faster, so it helps to be familiar with the types. So one kind of an inner critic is the perfectionist. You know, the part of us that says you can't do something unless you're perfectly ready for it. So I cannot take an exam unless I'm absolutely ready for any kind of a question. So till the time I feel absolutely thorough with all possible textbooks, I don't want to go take that exam because I won't do well. Or I don't want to, let's say at work, I don't want to raise my hand for that presentation because unless I'm absolutely confident of all possible knowledge in the area, I'm absolutely confident of presentation skills, I won't do it. So that's the perfectionist, which often becomes a deterrent because the perfectionist makes us pass on opportunities and not take them up just because we are looking for that perfect preparation, which hardly ever happens in life. You always have to work with limited data. But the perfectionist
mostly leads to procrastination.
Yeah. So you find a lot of people talking around, so I want to write that book, but I will write that book when I get that 2-week holiday by the beach and there is nobody to disturb me, and that's when I will start writing my book. So you're looking for that perfect atmosphere and the perfect setting for it, and that may never come. And the perfectionist doesn't allow other parts to operate till that perfect excuse of the setting happens. So it robs us of opportunities in a big way. And of course, needless to say, there is somebody inside who's listening to that perfectionist and therefore allowing him to operate. Then you've got the guilt tripper, which is a very common inner critic you find. This is the part of us that takes us on a guilt trip. So let's say you go have an extra ice cream or you have an extra drink once in a while. This part comes up and says, see, you were being irresponsible. You're a bad parent or you're a bad person. You shouldn't have done this. Why are you doing it for your own health? You have so many people dependent on you. Why should you be doing this? So this is the part of us that sends us on a guilt trip, and in the process does not allow us to enjoy indulgences which we may otherwise reasonably enjoy. It's not something that's very harmful that we're doing, but this is the part that attaches guilt to everything and in the process doesn't let us enjoy even let's say a simple extra drink or an extra dessert at the end of a wedding or something. It puts you on that guilt mode. And guilt tripping is, of course, it's an internal game. Very often we imbibe it from others also. When children are brought up with saying, you do this, you're making mama cry. That's when the child learns guilt tripping, and then it internalizes the guilt tripper, that critic, and even when the child is grown up and doesn't have the mother around, it will still think of, oh, if I do this, my parents might think it is wrong. Whereas the parent may have no connection with it at that point. But we often internalize a lot of guilt trips from other people around us. Then you've got the underminer. The underminer is that part of us that says, no, look at others around you. How are you good in front of all of them? So it keeps undermining our talents, our abilities, our processes, or whatever that is, by usually comparing us with others, saying, look at other people in your class, they're doing so well, why aren't you scoring as much? Or look at other people of my age in the organization, they have a better designation, or they have MBAs and they're earning better salaries. So it's the underminer is that part of us which will constantly compare us with the rest of the world, not acknowledge our situation in the process, only look at the superficial comparison and then in the process put us down. Again, the role of the underminer again is primarily protection. It is trying to make sure that you're not getting too big, or you're not becoming too famous, or you're not becoming too successful, because there is a risk associated with success. Right? So it instills the fear of success, because success comes with a lot of responsibility. It sometimes comes with fame. It comes with a lot of social standing, which then you need to sustain. And that fear of sustaining that success is handled by the underminer. So it lets you stay with failure or stay with mediocrity so that it's a safer game to play. Because success can be a very dangerous game to play. Yes?
Underperformer, any difference?
So underminer may lead to underperformance. It encourages underperformance. Because it says, you know, the underminer is that part of us that says, for example, that, you know, if you top the sales this quarter, next quarter they're going to give you a bigger target. So you might as well not meet your target this time, so that next quarter you're okay. That's typically the underminer's game, and therefore yeah, it may lead you to underperform if you believe the underminer.
That means you're losing your self-confidence.
Yeah, all of these ultimately play on the self-confidence and the self-image.
But then after the incident, then you will validate yourself. देखो बोला था ना.
That's the hook of the inner critic. I told you so.
Yeah.
Even if a little thing goes wrong, the inner critic will come up. Then you've got the destroyer, which is a very dangerous inner critic. It's that part of us which gets into that sabotage mode. And you'll see that in some people where there's a pattern of getting into something where there is self-sabotage. So somebody may get into a relationship, find a good relationship, but find some way to make sure the relationship goes sour and there is self-sabotage, and then you're out of it. Getting into the same pattern, finding another partner doing the same thing. There is an intentional destruction of relationships, of career opportunities, of jobs. Again, coming from the
But then what is the payback in that? Payoff?
The payoff is that there is a fear of rejection, right? So if I enter a relationship with you and I'm coming from a fear of rejection, I'd rather make sure I go on the defensive, I reject you first before there's even a remote opportunity for you to dump me. Right? So in the process, I'll unconsciously do things that will make sure that the relationship gets destroyed. In the process, I get to blame you. You don't have the opportunity to find fault in me. So the payoff is that I don't get rejected. And therefore, in order to not get rejected, I'd rather destroy the relationship. It's a very unconscious game that happens. But
yeah, a person would not do it intentionally, actually. But then comes like...
See, it's very... if you really look at yourself hard enough, it is visible. Right? But, yeah, intention, it's not a conscious intention.
No one would like to make a loss of something.
It's not a conscious intention, but people are usually very conscious of their fear when they are acting like that. The fear of rejection is very apparent. And yet people will still choose to make that same decision because it's just scary. So therefore, you will find that when the destroyer acts up, you will find the usual consequences are there is that scare, the fright of commitment. People find it very difficult to commit themselves to either a job or a relationship or career or whatever that is. There's usually that fear of commitment that comes with the destroyer. Then you've got the molder. The molder is that part of us which is trying to fit us in various definitions. So, to be a good daughter, you've got to be like this.
Survival of the fittest.
Not sort of survival of the fittest, but meeting expectations of others.
It's a label.
Yeah, the label, you know. So, if you have to be labeled as a good father in your community, this is how a good father in your community looks like. Right? These are the kind of clothes he wears, this is the kind of profession he has, these are the habits that he has. So that there is that, yeah, there are stereotypes that you're trying to fit into.
Good advice. Modern means giving good advice.
Not necessarily good advice. The molder is trying to fit you into a mold, a cast, right? So if this is how good husband is supposed to be like, this is how you ought to fit. Whether you fit into it or not is a different thing.
You need to be in that framework.
Yeah. The inner critic will force fit you. Whether you like it or not is a different thing.
Yes.
Trying to fit into particular belief system.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right? And the mold could be that of a certain country or a community or a religion, or sometimes even parental expectation that becomes a mold. Right? So if the parent has brought up a child saying that this is what a good boy or a good girl should be, then that's a force fit mold. I mean, that child may be nothing like that, but there is that mold, and at some point the child is likely to internalize that inner critic and say, okay, I think I'm a bad kid because I don't score good marks. Right? And the child grows up with that belief that I am not good enough just because the child, somewhere the inner critic is trying to fit him into a mold.
Even sometimes parents will tell, boy, you should not cry. As a boy, you should not cry.
A lot of our gender identities come from the molder critic. So girls don't do this, boys don't wear these kind of clothes, you don't wear this color, you don't grow your hair long or short or whatever. So all of those are molder critics, and the molders are usually absorbed from outside, from whatever community or country or family that we grow up in, and they come from outside, and somewhere we give them a place to stay in as our part, and
We feed them.
yeah, we feed them. They keep saying things and we feel bad about it, and in the process we try and what is normally termed compromise, and in the process neither is happy because the critic will always keep saying you're not a perfect fit, and we obviously don't want to be a perfect fit, so there's always that conflict that happens. Then you've got the taskmaster, which can be very deceptively useful. You know, the taskmaster critic normally acts up in terms of saying, okay, you've committed to losing 5 kilos, 5 o'clock on the dot, get up, go, whether you're having fever, feeling cold, not feeling up to it, not slept in the night, doesn't matter, go, get it done. So the taskmaster is the disciplinarian. It says you've got to do this, whether you like it or not, in the mood for it or not, in the health for it or not, doesn't matter, go, get it done.
It forces you.
It forces you. So usually the taskmaster is seen in terms of its outcome, and the outcome is that of a very rigid disciplinarian, saying I will eat only this much, and I will eat at 7 o'clock sharp, and I will not do this, and I won't drink tea, and so there is that rigidity that comes with the taskmaster.
Sure.
And it's a very, it really has physical consequences. I mean, you see people with high taskmasters invariably dealing with arthritis and joint pains and lack of circulation and all of that, because somewhere the taskmaster makes you rigid.
Do at any cost.
Yeah. And that has very clear physical repercussions.
They are mostly never in a restful state, you know,
Yeah,
very
because they
restless.
don't allow the taskmaster critic, if you give it predominance, it doesn't let you relax.
They're mostly restless.
Yeah, because it will say, okay, now you've done with tasks till 3 o'clock, get on to the 3:30 task. Don't rest in between, don't breathe. If you breathe, you're not good enough. It's a very high disciplinarian. So it doesn't let a person relax. And then finally, of course, you have the inner controller, which is constantly monitoring and saying, are you doing well with life? You can't
It's
be
an
relaxing.
umbrella, no? Inner controller is umbrella.
Not sure. They're usually categorized as 7 different types of inner critic. So the inner controller, yeah, in that sense, all of them are controlling. But the inner controller specifically is the kind of a critic which makes you very restless. Even if you're looking to indulge sometimes, saying, okay, I've done this project really well, or I've done this exam really well, I've got 1 week of vacation, let me relax. And the inner control will come up and say, no, if you relax too much, then you'll have a problem, so don't relax. Right? So the other polarity of the inner controller is the indulger, right? Which says, let your hair down and party. The inner controller will say, no, you can never get to that stage, because anyone who gets to that stage goes off course. So therefore you shouldn't go even close to that. Yeah. It's like saying, that is, often as teenagers we hear, that guy is bad company, you shouldn't go anywhere close to that. That's the job of the inner controller, that says, no, don't go close to that behavior, because that's being too relaxed, too indulgent.
Pros and cons.
It doesn't look at pros, it only looks at cons. It always says that you party too much, you go for a nice vacation, you won't feel like coming back and working. So don't go to that nice vacation. So that's the inner controller. So the polarity of the indulger. So all of these inner critics, the polarity of the inner critic is usually some form of a rebel. That says, forget it, I'm not going to hear the critic. But in the process, of course, also not being productive, because the rebel goes on the other extreme. It's not very useful behavior either. So, how do we work with these voices or paths inside us? The standard IFS model for working with most paths is the 3 steps of see, understand and offer compassion. So, if an inner critic comes up, you hear an inner critic coming up anytime during the day, first step would be to acknowledge. The see part is acknowledge and say, hey, okay, you exist, there is a part of me that's doubting it, there's a part of me trying to control it or manage it in some way. Acknowledge the part and say, okay, I know you exist. The second piece is understanding, which is having that dialogue to say, I know you exist, and I know you exist in order to protect me. At this moment, I may not understand what you're trying to protect me from, but there's something you're trying to preserve. There is some self-preserving instinct which has brought up this part. So I understand that you have a utility. And the third piece is that actual engagement with that part, where you say, where you're offering compassion. Offering compassion is in terms of telling that part that, okay, while you're putting me in a state of self-doubt, while you're lowering my self-confidence at this moment, because I believe you have a useful intent, let's talk. I'm not going to judge you as being bad, because I believe that you have a useful intent. Is there permission to explore this dialogue and see where is that useful intent? What is that useful intent? And usually when you get into that dialogue, and that dialogue can be done in a meditative way by just sitting and talking to oneself, a lot of times it helps to write this dialogue, especially with inner critic. It always helps to have a written dialogue, because the tendency is the moment you come to the third step of actually engaging with the critic, a firefighter will normally come up and say, divert, you've got these things to do, don't get into the dialogue. Because the inner critic, of course, wants to survive also. Right? There is that survival instinct which is natural.
Not with the method you explained in second part, like position wise.
You can do that as well, but with inner critic I usually find it helps to write, because what happens in that process is
you may shift it.
Yeah, sometimes you go off track because the inner critic pulls you out. There's huge survival instinct. So when it's on paper in front of you, there is nothing more that you can. It's there.
Forced to jot it.
Yeah. So it helps to write and say, okay, tell me, what are you protecting me for? So you're telling me that I shouldn't take this vacation. What happens if I do take? What happened the last time I went on a vacation? Did I lose out on a promotion opportunity? Did I meet with an accident? What happened? What is it that you're trying to protect me from? And so have that dialogue with the inner critic. Depending on what the critic is trying to do, the dialogue will of course differ, but it really helps to. So the dialogue is, it really helps to, in whatever language you're doing, it helps to mind the language in terms of not labeling the inner critic by saying you're bad. It's just about saying, I know you're trying to do something useful for me, so let's please talk.
Yeah.
It is important to make that part feel safe.
Acknowledge it.
But then how do you arrive at the judgment?
So there is no judgment in the
How
process.
you decide then whether to do or not to do?
So you look at the pros and cons. It's possible that at the end of the process you might say, okay, while I would like to go the other way, somewhere the inner critic at this point still feels comfortable. Whatever the inner critic says, still feels comfortable for me. So till the time I'm willing to shift that jump and release the critic, I will take this step, but I will do so consciously. I'm not doing this unconsciously now that I have no choice. I have a choice, I'm choosing to do what the inner critic says. So if the inner critic is saying, no, don't go for that party, instead sit and study for this exam, I might have that dialogue, and the inner critic might come up and say that, the last time you didn't study for that exam and this happened, and the last time could have been 20 years ago, it doesn't matter. You might, at the end of that dialogue, say, okay, I very much want to go to that party, but I'm also not very confident of my exam. I don't think I'm prepared enough. So this time, I'm going to go along with the inner critic, but not because I don't have a choice. I'm choosing to go with the inner critic. So in that process, you're releasing the critic, and also what happens is the moment that part feels heard, that okay, it's acknowledged, the next time around it's not going to act up so much.
Reducing the intensity.
Yeah, because it knows its existence is validated, it's acknowledged, it's not going to come up in a unconscious or in a bad way next time.
Like
The intensity goes down.
Like parents.
Yeah, once they trust you, they don't really follow up so much. Yeah, it's a similar process in a way. So, typically, as I said, the techniques that usually work are writing. So, what you're trying to do in the process is unblend, right? And normally what happens when an inner critic comes up is, there is a very typical reaction pattern. Inner critic comes up, you get panicky, and then you stop doing whatever you were wanting to do. So, what we're trying to do through the transformation process is unblend the reaction to the critic. Let the critic come up, start writing, start dialoguing, and don't let that repetitive pattern of response come up. Break that pattern. Because ultimately the inner critic is trying to put us in a state of hopelessness. The idea is to give hope to that situation and say alternatives exist. It doesn't have to be this way. So all my life I don't have to be a bad public speaker. All my life I don't have to be bad at numbers. So the inner critic puts you in a state of hopelessness by saying, 7th standard you failed in maths, which means all your life you're going to be bad at numbers. Whereas the process here is to say, alright, I acknowledge I failed in 7th standard, but it doesn't mean I cannot pick up skills now. So there is an alternative that's coming up through the dialogue process. So the unblending process is the transformational process of the inner critic. If you want to blend multiple things, the swish pattern in NLP often helps when you're dealing with the inner critic.
What is this swish pattern?
Swish pattern is an NLP technique which helps you disassociate responses from stimulus. So, let's say for example, the stimulus is I see a dog and my typical response is run away because I'm scared of dogs. The swish pattern is a pattern that says, okay, I see a dog doesn't have to mean run away. I see a dog could also mean I see a dog and the dog does what it does, I do what I do, and I don't have to react to the dog all the time. The sense of fear that's associated with the dog can be broken. So you swish it. So there is an NLP process with which you can the video, NLP video is there on swish patterns, which you can look up later, where basically what you're saying is a certain stimulus doesn't have to have that response. You can have a choice of response. So you break the association of dog with running away. You say dog is dog and I can choose whatever response I want in that particular moment. So I may choose the response of going and petting the dog. I may choose to say ignore the dog and walk on. Right? It doesn't have to be run away from the dog. So that's the swish pattern, which is a very simple pattern. In 5 minutes and you can be done with the process and fix the responses through that. Or if you're not used to NLP, you can just simply write and have that dialogue in the process. As you said, you can still use visual theatrics. You can still use spaces like we said the last time, but writing usually works better with NLP because sometimes results are so deep.
Chances of sleeping is more.
Because sometimes you might get carried away. If the inner critic is very strong, it will dominate that conversation, so it won't let you go into certain spaces and reasons.
But here using in switch pattern, you have to do same thing, bigger picture or...
Yes, same switch pattern. So you shift the anchors.
Shift the anchors.
Yeah.
Means you reduce the picture of inner critic.
Yeah, so you identify what is your visual anchor. So if your visual anchor is that when you think of a situation, you see it very clearly in color,
all patterns.
whatever. You shift. So when you're swishing, you make it black and white, you make it very fuzzy, you push it.
Okay.
So the same swish pattern that you
Maybe is it writing would be better, but what exactly how you would write that?
So you write like a dialogue, like how a movie script looks like. There's one speaker, another speaker, so hero says this, heroine says this, hero says this, heroine says this. So that conversation. So you can do that. So there is self, which is you, and there is this inner critic part, whichever inner critic has come up. So you start having that dialogue saying, so the self can say, I hear that you're trying to stop me from going to speak at the conference. The inner critic will say, yes, obviously I'm trying to stop you because the last time you spoke at a conference it was a disaster. Self can come back into the dialogue to say, I hear you, but this time around I really see this conference as an opportunity to grow my career. I really want to use this opportunity and I understand that you're trying to protect me. Would you like to speak further about what you're trying to protect? And then let the inner critic talk. So it's a very conscious dialogue that you're...
That is auto-suggestion, it is like...
not auto-suggestion, in the sense you're very conscious of the process. So it's not like auto-writing if that's what you mean. You're not channeling something else. You're still having a dialogue with a part of yourself.
What is different between auto-writing and auto-suggestion?
Auto-writing is a mediumistic method where you're trying to channel a certain energy.
When you this way or that way, you have to give it to the brain or the conscious mind or unconscious mind.
Yes. No, but here it's a deliberately conscious process. You're not saying, okay, let the pen write what it writes.
It's not a subconscious process, it's a conscious.
It's a very conscious process. You're letting that. So a lot of times, and with most people it happens that when you're doing the writing process, you actually imagine the inner critic sitting in one part of you. Like you'll feel the inner critic sitting on right side of the head or in your stomach or wherever. So when you're addressing that part, you can address the dialogue coming from that space.
Writing goes to conscious mind, whereas auto-suggestion goes to the unconscious mind.
Yes.
Which one is the effective one?
Here in this process, we're looking at working with the conscious mind. Auto-suggestion has its own uses, but here we're not using that process here because the inner critic is very loud and clear. We don't need to work with the unconscious, work directly with the conscious. So writing is usually the easier technique, but swish pattern works equally well if you're familiar with it.
Writing also helps to observe the pattern, I suppose, because
yes,
in sales also
Usually we write name of the people we are going to follow. And after some days we see mostly we are following same people. Like nothing new is there, and that maybe result you are not getting because of that also. So
it gives you documentation, records.
look
of
back
things, yeah.
and
You are developing a case history. No?
Yeah.
yeah, that way.
And actually, if you maintain a journal of sorts, a lot of times all inner critics will have a certain pattern.
Certain pattern, yeah. I think it is very useful. I mean, if we use it for different situations, and you yourself can realize the pattern,
Yeah.
and you can improve your personality based on that.
Because eventually you can, and if you really work with the process, you can actually release the inner critic
Yes.
altogether if you're engaging it enough. So the idea is ultimately this journey that you're looking at engaging the inner critic, appreciating the intent of the inner critic. Why does it exist? It exists to serve you, to protect you, to safeguard you. So in the process, you transform the inner critic into the inner champion, which actually starts rooting for you and says, hey, there's an opportunity coming up next week for presenting in the office. Take it up. You'll do well. So the inner critic can actually transform into the inner booster.
Even that may lead to your improve your planning also.
Yeah. Because you're shifting it into a very resourceful state. So it's not like when you work, the idea is not to make the inner critic die. No parts die in the process. And that's true for all IFS processes. We're not trying to kill any part. The idea is to transform the parts.
It's a sort of a optimistic pessimism. They term it. It's a pessimism,
Actually,
but it is optimistic.
Yeah.
Inner critic reduces your confidence, whereas by doing this, it will increase your confidence.
Yeah, so what happens with the inner champion is it's not making you overconfident, but it says, hey, here's an opportunity, why don't you look at it?
That fear goes away.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the fear goes away. You can, of course, by all means, it will still make you use caution, but at least it will let you explore opportunities, whereas an inner critic doesn't let
It
you
doesn't
explore.
allow you to try also.
And you will know the hurdles also
Yes.
Yeah,
in advance.
yes.
Sometimes we don't even try, thinking of this failure and fears. So at least that would not happen.
Yeah.
You would try at least and see what happens.
Yeah. The inner critic will always bring up fear of failure. So the idea is to engage it, and then the inner champion can come into a space of saying, okay, here is a good thing you might try. Possible you will do well, there is a possibility you might not do well, but why don't you do your best? The inner dialogue shifts, so there is a lot more rest and relaxation if nothing else.
Yeah, it's from critic to blind.
Yeah,
It is also
absolutely. It becomes from being critical to being nurturing. So it's not about saying do everything you want to do, but being nurturing enough and
also it would reduce the conflict in you, because sometimes you are in too much of conflict with it. Not to do.
So all of IFS is about reducing inner
Right.
conflict.
Right.
That's the whole purpose of using internal family systems. So the moral of the story being we're not killing any family member, but just transforming the relationship.
Creating a team.
It's creating a functional family.
Functional.
So that's that for today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.